All right, I have a question for the audience. How many of you have had a McDonald's burger? How many of you have had a McDonald's burger? All of us? What did you see when McDonald's came into India? McDonald's today is catering to the Indian audience in a very different way. It's only in India where you get a veg burger. It's only in India where you get that, special mac chutneys, which are, specific to the Indian audience. All of this is about agility. McDonald's decided to pivot. And that's exactly the theme of our afternoon session today. And with me, we have an amazing set of panelists. We've been discussing this a little before and getting ready for our panel. And we said we'd like to speak a little on business growth and agility. We'd like to talk about, the definition of work and the kind of contemporary work and skills that are, there in the industry today with the future of work. And we'd also like to talk about innovation. And let me introduce the panel a bit here, starting with a lovely lady on stage, Ms. Uma, who's the Chief People Officer at Kaveri Hospitals. Thank you. Uma has an amazing career span, and her interest is to solve gaps in the healthcare system through technology. Her role involves all about digital transformation, innovation, leadership, and talent. Very quickly, we also have with us Prahlad. Prahlad is a thought leader in the process of writing a book, and Prahlad brings with him an extensive global work experience. He's been driving strategic frameworks, models across HR. Prahlad has also been a speaker at the Summit on HR and Analytics. And today, Prahlad is going to talk about different areas of work models in the contemporary workspace and practices towards future of work. And our third panelist, thank you. And our third panelist is Mughal. Mughal, in short, comes with a twist on the entire aspect of the future of work and agility. Mughal is an entrepreneur. And Mughal, when we ask him, what would you do next? He says, nothing, just entrepreneurship. And we said, let's understand from Mughal, what is it to run a entrepreneurship around the business of drones? So Mughal's been an entrepreneur for the last 1 decade, and a young entrepreneur who has pivoted his business, been agile, straight after Purdue. The only thing he knows is how to be an entrepreneur. Great. Thank you. And with that, right, let's deep dive into our first part of the business growth and agility aspect of the future of work. Prahlad, you've done work around the 5D model and principles and frameworks to help business transformation. What has been your journey with that?
Thanks, Tushna, and thanks to CHRMP. Very quickly, it was a pleasure being here. Generally, not here in the beginning of the session, I was saying, so I wanted to listen to Mr. Palnivel Tyagarajan, the Honorable Minister, speak, because very few ministers we have who are articulate across India. I wanted to share this with you more as common fraternity before I get into the topic. So Tushna and everyone, so my journey has been very interesting, right? I started from Dr. Besantraj Consultant. So Dr. Besantraj shared the bench in Harvard with P. Chidambaram and C.K. Prahlad. I learned business process re-engineering back in the 90s from him. Then it's been in tech all along. So today we dip into the 60 framework of Peter Diamandis. I don't know how many of you here follow Singularity Hub. The Singularity Hub, it's a cool website. Any thought leadership that comes in design and tech first hits the Singularity Hub, then becomes an idea, then it gets manifested in some way, and then you have somebody doing a TED talk on it, right? So the 6D is basically disruption, digitization, dematerialization, demonetization, democratization, and deception. If you're making a service or a product, and if it clicks on all 6 Ds, and it could be anything, right? You don't have to be a tech product person. So I keep telling my team, you can make a HR process, you can make anything. If it can click on at least 3 or 4 Ds, it's pretty awesome, right? That is an agile product that you are building. So a lot of times you're in the conundrum that we want to be in the agile workforce, but is the end product far better? From the Nokia to the iPhone, right? From radios to iPod. When Steve Jobs said 1,000 songs in the pocket, he basically dematerialized. And then he brought the iPhone, he dematerialized the iPod. So you had no material called the iPod anymore. Your phone became your iPod. So I keep constantly telling people in HR that you won't have a seat on the table with the business. You can simply call yourself business partner, but shit won't move unless you are really understanding the business grounds up. And for that, you have to make something that makes business sense. And only from that, you reverse work and create the process. You don't create the process and try to find business sense in it, right? And in this, automatically Agile happens, Tushna and everyone. Right. So my journey has been that. When you have this thought process, Agile automatically happens, because then you are not anymore thinking, you are not very passionate only about your craft. You want to know about other people's craft, absolutely, how it can be married to them and their challenges too.
From the lens of business growth. Correct. Then, absolutely. And that kind of gets us to talking with Uma, and the hospital sector is really different. And why we say that, it's a traditional sector. And she was talking about all her experiences of building business growth and the ecosystem for startups. And it's amazing to listen to this story. So Uma, a little more on that, so.
Thank you, Tushna. So I work for a hospital where being agile or being innovative cannot happen on patients, right? So the scope is very limited. So we have different work profiles. We knew where we should be innovating and where we should not. We did a lot of automation work in the non-clinical processes, a lot of innovation in the non-clinical processes, and we were learning so many things during this process. And around that time is when COVID hit. And it kind of, put a showstopper to all our, work, what we were intensely working on. Everything kind of came to a standstill. But what was interestingly happening is that the startup investment segment was full on. There was no slowdown there. And with remote work and, remote meetings, all that became a norm of the day. And then, our founder was part of the angel investment community. And there were a lot of investors in Chennai who were sending startups, the healthcare segment startups, our way just to see if it was investable or not. So I did meet a lot of founders at that point of time, because, Dr. Arvind then would send them to me, and then I'll end up, interacting with them, understanding what they are trying to do. And that's when, he nudged us to start the innovations department, because we felt that there's a lot that can be done within the hospital by our employees, and also a lot that can be learned from what's happening outside. And this was very important, because what was happening outside was beyond our thought process, right, because you get so caught up in your day-to-day operations and business growth that you would not have an alternative thinking, process. Talking to the founders gave us those insights, what exactly are they thinking about? What are they trying to reinvent? What are they trying to innovate? And that's when we decided to start up incubation center. Wow. We met a lot of founders, and our management was kind enough to park a certain amount for investment into these startups. We were predominantly looking at only healthcare startups. I'm proud to say 3 years down the line we have totally made 3 investments, and one company was completely incubated within Kaveri. They came asking for funds, but then what happened was we saw the potential in the company, and they pivoted to a completely different product, and we have adopted. I mean, we are now customers of this particular company across all our 12 hospitals, and they're going outside as well, and they have raised funds from other investors. So we are proud to say that we've been able to support the community outside the hospital as well.
That's great. Yeah. Thanks, Uma. And this is so important in the space of agility. That is, we create an ecosystem for agility. And business growth only happens when we pivot, when we think disruption, when we create the ecosystem. Mughal, when you talk about being an entrepreneur and agility, pivoting, I think it comes naturally, right? What has been your experiences when it comes to just the business growth, agility, pivoting? How have you worked in this part of it?
Thank you for the time and the invitation here. Very happy to be here. So I'll just quickly answer that question. I think when I started out as an entrepreneur, I think it's at some level, I think we've all grown up with some sort of structure, and we're going to whatever school, college, and house and parenthood and everything, right? So you have your structured life, and once you're out of it, and once you're not in a particular career path, and you're out there without a resume, without anything to look back on, right? When you really can trust only your core skills, or if you have any, that I didn't have any when I just graduated from college from Purdue. I was like, okay, I had a resume but nothing, right? So when you're in that kind of a framework and zone, right, you are naturally trying to grow, right? Naturally trying to, figure out how to make money, right? What can you do to actually make money? How can you stay relevant, right? And I'm sure that a lot of us, all of us, if we don't have a safety net, will automatically start thinking in different ways to survive and grow and thrive, right? And that, I think, was, and my job in the company, what we have about 75-80 people, is to figure out and motivate people to ensure that they're responsible for each other's salary as well as responsible for each other's individual growth, right? Of course, there are several systems to figure out how to do the motivation and how to create a structure so that everybody is cohesively going in that direction, and everybody else here is an expert over here. But the core philosophy that what we would like to operate in, and what we've found it useful, is to realize that only via individual growth will the company grow, right? And there's nothing called company growth and then suddenly individuals grow in the company, right? Mm-hmm. It never happens, right? Somebody in the organization is showing superior growth, mm-hmm. which somehow lifts the entire org along, right? And if everybody is growing individually, I think automatically the company becomes very successful, right? And my job as an entrepreneur has been, mostly to motivate people to think in that direction, to think that, today, are we growing? Are we thinking about ourselves? Are we growing individually? And how are we able to hence grow the company to the next order of magnitude?
That's an excellent spin to the whole idea of agility, right? We've seen traditional setups, we've seen established organizations, and we're seeing the startup, the entrepreneur talk to us about, business growth and agility. And what comes to our mind is that we don't have traditional jobs anymore, right? And I think what we've all seen is the work architecture, the kind of jobs we have are changing. And it talks about contemporary jobs, new ways of motivating teams, new ways of developing skills, and that's agility. Thanks, Mukul. That was a really nice spin on how we grow an organization. Talking of contemporary jobs, I do remember a year and a half back, I was in the consulting space, and something that came up, and I was discussing this with Augie the other day, was fractional HR, fractional CTOs, fractional CFOs. Now just look at the way jobs are changing. They're becoming more skill-focused, experience-focused, right? And backed with that, there is an important word, fungibility. What I have as a skill here, can I apply it to multiple different areas? There are some brilliant, aspects which, Prahlad and Uma and Mugul have also spoken about. Prahlad, you've done some great work in automating the competencies and the skills focus, when it comes to jobs. What has been your experience there? And some great practice that you've implemented?
We experimented in one of my previous companies called Financial Software and Systems, FSS. We experimented in role-based architecture, call it the RBA. Then when I took over a year back in MSIS, where I currently work, we had a complete white paper on the competency framework. And so I was always intrigued by, if you go to an apartment or a children's park, right? You see there's an iron frame for the children to climb on.
Yes, yes.
And if you look at the psychology of the child in the park, the child will always want to climb straight up. it will never first go horizontal. Very rarely you will see, 100 children do that, 10% only will go side and all. So it is in the human nature to climb up.
Right.
And once they do that once or twice, they get bored.
Right.
Then they start experimenting. They want to do diagonal. So you have this set of iron bars as a frame, and they're doing diagonal. Then they do different things. Then one kid is sitting like a monkey in one place alone and trying to show off, saying, see how I can balance sitting on this bar. So I always kind of akin that to the career growth framework, and we called it the climbing frame.
That's
at
nice.
MSIS, and we call it CPF, Career Progression Framework. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to marry the Peter Diamandis 6D framework and say we wanted to democratize this. Why should people come to HR and say, I want to go to the next level? It means HR has not done its job properly. Competencies are not transparent enough. So then we carved out career stations. So we have 5 career stations. We have early career, we have emerging leaders, practicing leaders, and established leaders. And then you have top management. So within each of these career stations, you have 4 or 5 roles.
Okay.
So people progress through these roles, because in India, the social factor is also, people want their designation to change every 18 months.
Yes.
Because auntie is telling that their son became lead in that company. Did your son become manager? Right? So you have to balance both. You have to bring meaning to the business. And so we did that, and that's the first phase. The second phase of that was, how do you cull out competencies for each role? And competencies are not, I said, take all the English and put it in the dustbin. I don't want to hear English. I want to hear numbers, metrics in a rubric. So if you say somebody is level 4 on Java as a software engineer, and 3, 4, and 5 being highest. If you're 2, you don't cut it, right? So if he's 4 on Java, you should not simply say he's great in Java and all of that, right? You can write X line of code in Y amount of time with Z amount of quality, okay, for whichever customer. And there is a practice who heads Java, so they have to give a chapa, which is your SME. And once they do that, they go to the CPF portal, they click on that role, and you click on the role, it shows you what competency level you need to be there. You showcase the competency, and then you apply. HR is completely hands-off. So we wanted to create these kind of tools, right, and work furiously in the back end, like the duck pedaling away. In the top it's calm, but below the water it's pedaling away furiously. We want to build that kind of ecosystem. And so give power to people is basically the thing, and transparency. Let people know what it takes to be a CXO. Right? And they can have the ambition, it's fair, and they can work through it, and you create it. So, yeah.
And that's kind of building agility within the organization itself. There's a skills agility, there's a learning agility, when you have a framework like this in place.
Absolutely, right? Tushna, like you earlier said, the fungibility.
Right?
Yeah. Then after that, HR's got fantastic data, and then you've got an AI toolkit that can sit on the data, and a machine that learns. You have a ML, machine learning happening. Saying how many people can actually sit on 4 seats. Right. Or 4 roles, and are those roles critical to the company? Right. If you have people who can, sit on 5 or 6 critical roles, I think it's pretty good. It's pretty good,
and then we call them multi-skilled, right?
Correct.
Multi-skilled with multi-experience, and that's when an organization's truly growing in that particular space.
Yes.
And it's contemporary to think that an organization's growth is only based on sales, right? It's also based on the skills that exist in the system today.
Absolutely.
When you talk about the future of work and agility.
Sales, I think, is the lifeblood of the company, but you need muscles, bone, the liver, everything to work.
With the skills, fungible skills. Right, great. Thanks, Prahlad. And Uma, you would have had your experiences of developing that skills and the fungible skills, in the hospital sector, but it's not easy, right? The roles are different. There would have been a nudge for change. What has been your experiences, and how have you set up that ecosystem?
So I was not a typical HR when I joined Kaveri. I came from a tech background, and I wanted to restart my career, and I got in. And the first assignment was in learning and development. I was just
wow.
telling you how
Yeah,
horrible it was. I just couldn't understand, because the variety of manpower, the IQ levels and the competencies available within a hospital is from probably we have housekeeping staff who have not done schooling.
Very diverse,
Two, we
yeah.
have doctors, who have worked in UK, had FRC has done, and then so one end the spectrum was like too huge, and to get everybody to work together was the biggest challenge. And like when I started, I knew that this industry had to be rigid in certain departments. For example, the nursing, it works like a military. The command chain is like pretty clear, and the nurses, are pretty tight team, and there's great handing over, taking over, and the continuity of care needs to be kept on when a patient is there. So I knew that these skills there are very, very important. We need to understand. But the healthcare ecosystem itself had a very good established practice. So there's something called privileging, where the skills are assessed for the nurses, and each one is given permission to practice that particular skill only if they have qualified for it. So we have a complete matrix on the privileges available for all the nurses, and every 6 months we keep moving them. They have to show progress in their privileges, otherwise they go back into training. So this part was pretty sorted. It took me some time to learn what was happening there. What I felt was that everything was done in a very traditional manner, and there was nothing available on the go. The learning was happening in the classroom, and then once they are out of the classroom, there's absolutely no help. So there was a lot of scope for us to innovate there, and then bring in just-in-time learning, which we were just discussing about. And that took us some time. However, the other departments are where we could innovate. I could play around, we did a lot of interesting things. We understood the competency that is available. And here, in the non-clinical side, we really did not, have to have any particular skill to work. So we had a broad range of skills that we could, adopt inside. So I can have somebody who's done engineering come in and work in operations, and I can have somebody working, who's done, commerce come and work in operations, as long as they have the, attitude. So it was easy for us to map those skills and get them to work in operations. While with the housekeeping team, we needed a bit more structure, because we had to innovate there. Rather than innovate, I would say learn from the manufacturing industry, where the visual learning methods were pretty relevant, right? So we had to adopt those practices, learn from the other industries, adopt those practices, and bring in some structure within the housekeeping team. So yes, and the doctors took care of themselves, so we didn't have to work with them though.
They came qualified already.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Uma. Right, and I think I like the way Uma talks about building a learning ecosystem, and the shift from just having an LMS to a KMS, a knowledge management system, to now just-in-time learning, right? And Numa and I were talking extensively, and she spoke about innovative ways in which people can scan a QR code and they get instant learning, and some great practices happening in a traditional sector. So while all of this is so structured, Mugil, an entrepreneur, right, when you're just about starting up, and in the space of drones, India by itself has new age businesses. Now it's difficult for us to find certain skills and certain skill sets. How have you worked around this? There's no structure here. I like the way you said everybody learns together, everyone grows together. So what have been some of your ways in which you've got these skills for your growth and agility?
Okay, great question, right? So, fortunately or unfortunately, we don't have such elaborate systems given our size and of the org, right? I wish someday we will implement more of this, but I think at a core level, right? So what do? We basically, so I think every industry has its own unique way of learning. So we largely are an engineering solutions company, right? So we work with drones, and we work with large industries like mines, solar, power lines. That's our business. Our business is to tell customers, this is what's going on in your work. This is not what's going on in your work site. There's something's wrong, etc., etc. These are the use cases that we try to productize. And along the way, we had to work with with the government to help drone policy from it being banned to now being, liberalized across the board, right? So there's a lot of blue ocean thinking in terms of problem solving on the go. Right, where we go to a mine, we ask them, okay, we're flying a drone today. What can we do to you? What does that mean to you? What does the data mean to you? Can we help you save fuel? Can we help you monitor your productivity? Those kind of questions, right? So when you go in that particular journey, the one promise that I think I give most of my engineers, there are two basic things in learning, right? I think India is blessed with a lot of good engineers, right? I think we are not as blessed with a lot of good opportunities, right? So as long as you give good people great opportunities and a safety net to say that it's okay to fail, right? But I want you to do your very best.
Yeah.
Right? I think that gives sufficient motivation for them to, at least a small team or a young team, to go there and try whatever they can.
That's lovely.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you just connect them to the right mentors or subject matter experts, I think at some level they try to get to 90% of what is expected out of them. Right? So that's been more or less the goal. And we've been on the go problem solving for large enterprises, right? And we always have some sort of structure in terms of documenting them so that you can reuse some of the learnings. And the culture is always about learning, right? I think when you have a culture of learning, right? And a culture of saying that you have to share what you learn, because the only way you'll truly understand or you'll truly appreciate is by you actually teaching them. Teaching the next person. Right? That way knowledge doesn't become, a barrier, right? So in what I have noticed is sometimes when people get insecure, they try to, guardrail information. Right? And that's what people try to showcase as power.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And that automatically limits growth of the org, of the individual, of everybody else.
Right.
Right? As long as that you're keeping people secure and telling them, what, there's always a bigger opportunity, a bigger learning, a bigger role for you, so that you can teach and you should spread your knowledge across, maybe technical, maybe managerial, maybe even how to teach people.
Right.
Right? If you can share your superpower to other people, right? I think that way you will automatically build that ecosystem and fostering some sort of culture and design thinking.
That's nice.
Right? That's mostly how we operate, at least.
That's it. Sure.
See, traditionally what most of the bigger organizations would like to do is always have an MIS system, track the performance and then put a number to everything, right? When you're trying to bring in something new, if you take this approach of, tracking and putting a number to it, that's when people feel very threatened. Acceptance to make change or change the practice, everything becomes very scary for people there. So you need to reinforce that this is not going to affect them, their performance monitoring or performance metrics or their salary or their increments. That's when the culture of change or any pivoting or continuous improvement would
sets into the organization. And I think what we're kind of realizing is it's not just a structure, but it's a culture. Right, and thanks Mughal for that different spin onto the entire aspect. As we wrap up, the last part of this is innovation fuels agility. Right, we've spoken of culture, we've spoken of skills, we've spoken of new jobs, we spoke about pivoting. Just your one thought: innovation fuels agility. Your thought before we wrap up for this panel.
There is a senior leadership development program that we are putting together with MIT Sloan. For some of our leaders, and we talk agile leadership. When we talk agile leadership, they are saying that there are two things, and I was telling, in traditional shop floor, I was telling this to somebody when we were talking outside. Toyota is a case study. So in Toyota, they are doing innovation, but they also have a shop floor. So somebody said, in the shop floor, how do you bring in agile?
Yeah, yes.
Right? It's one bolt after one bolt. So where is agile in that? And that's when Toyota actually built a cord actually. So if somebody's got a problem, they just press a button. And it kind of links to the nearest possible SME who will reach that person in X amount of time, solve the problem, and that moves.
Right.
So they're bringing agile and collaboration in a shop floor environment.
That's amazing, right?
Right?
Amazing.
So imagine, and then there is Tesla. That's exactly what Uma said. Is Tesla, right? They are not writing any process.
Yeah.
They're saying you create a best practice and just leave it there. Others will follow. And they are looking at mean time between one best practice to another best practice.
And that's what Mughal also told us about. Like, it's just you learn.
You learn.
Everybody else learns.
Correct.
And we just spin agility in learning itself, right?
Right. So Elon Musk is not bothered about you follow the shop floor, nothing. He is measuring his company's ability to innovate based on the mean time between marked inventions that are coming from the group.
From the group
and he
itself.
knows that group is effective.
Yeah.
And we are doing that. That's very different.
Yeah.
I'll share a story of one of our product deployments. So we wanted to do something for the housekeeping department. See, healthcare is a very, very intense service sector. We have around 150 patients, admitted. We have close to 100, housekeeping staff catering to various requirements of the, patients. But when we are sitting outside, the operations leaders or HR team, none of us knew what was happening there. What exactly is happening? Where is the roadblock? The patients, when they go out of the hospital, they, leave some complaints. And that's when we realized something went wrong. But live information about what was happening in the hospital was not available for us. So that was one of the products, that we wanted to, bring in. Technology support was in that area, and we did find a solution there. So what was happening is we created a centralized call center where the patients could actually call the call center and ask for service. This is mainly to relieve the nurses of non-clinical duties, because the patients had only access to the nurses, right? They press the call bell for anything. It could be for their blanket, it could be for an additional coffee, or it could be, some dress change or anything, right? But it was eating into the nurses' time, and the nurses would have then convey to the housekeeping, and then the housekeeping has to come and do this work. However, we brought in a platform where the call center picks the request, and then they key into the platform automates the request system. So all the housekeeping staff were given a smartphone. There is an app installed, so they get the request, and then they go finish the service, and then they have to close the request, right? So when we brought in the solution, very interesting to see, the first 10 days there was a lot of people didn't want, because we are all going to know who's done what work, how much work. So they're like, the management wants to track everybody's work. So they're trying to spy on us. This was how, people were talking about. But then, however, we coaxed them and we told them, let's just pilot, we're not going to do anything. The data is not going to be used for anything else. And we gave them the phone, and they were happy to, have a nice new brand, new phone. So the first week, once they decided to adopt, was that we would see, so what happens in the system is that there is a TAT time for every service request. If the service is not completed within the TAT time, it gets escalated to level 1, then level 2, and then it goes to the unit head. So what we were seeing is that all the requests were closed within the TAT time, right? However, we were getting patient complaints saying that we did not get this service. And then when we went and looked at the data, a lot of services that were closed at 0 seconds, right? So that's not possible at all, right? So this is the problem here. So they all felt that if it gets escalated, their supervisor would know, and then they are going to, some punishment would be there. So then we removed the entire monitoring system, and we told them this is just to study. So one project that we took was delay in water bottle being, given, and the housekeeping team came up with a solution saying that why are we getting delayed? It's because it's getting transported from some other place. So they moved the entire storage system into the floor, and then they started distributing it. So today we have more than 100 such small projects that was picked because of the data that we got from the platform. And this was a big enablement, for the housekeeping stuff.
And that's when innovation becomes
So
just part of
innovation,
everybody's day-to-day
absolutely,
activity.
and enabling them, giving them the right tools and encouraging the right practices.
That's great, Uma. Thank you. And Mughal, I know we're short of time, but we'd like to hear your side. Innovation fuels agility.
I think I can double click on what Uma just said, right? So we constantly try to innovate by force because when you have resource constraints, you have no choice but to innovate.
Right.
Right? You have to figure out how to do a lot more work with a lot less on your plate. So you always try to think about innovative solutions to solve for it. But coming to something which at a core level, we are an operations team, right? And most of the times what happens is the fact that what I at least notice is the fact that people naturally have disparities in a company because you have, we have a small team, we have some set of developers, technologists, we have operations, we have drone operators, etc., right? So there's a natural disparity amongst people that, okay, some people are supposed to solve the problem, right? And some people are supposed to just, use the solution. Right? And natural dynamic of people thinking, right, is the fact that some people are seen to be more important because they are more innovative, right? So in order to bridge that particular gap, and you have this respect going around, everybody is equal in more than words, and everybody has to innovate, right? Yeah. So what we used to do, or what we tried doing, and we are doing also, is the fact that we ensure that the most core competency what people differentiate amongst themselves is the ability to code, right? People who have even simple knowledge of coding, right, somehow, and whether they feel they are important or not is separate story, but the other people start feeling they're important.
Right.
So the real reason, and that stops a lot of innovation from happening at the levels what you actually want it to happen, because they somehow believe that it's not my problem to solve.
Right.
It's somebody else's problem to solve.
It's a problem to solve, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in which case what we did was we basically had a small 15-20 people ops team. We really told them that, you have to code. Right? It can be small code, it can be big code, it can be any code. But we will give you the tools to solve your own problems.
Right.
Right? It is okay. It can be the worst solution ever because an internal solution anyway. It's not going to be seen to the customer. It's not going to be seen anywhere.
It can fail also.
Yeah, it can fail. Great. It really doesn't matter.
Great.
Right? But I will give you the tools to solve your own problem. Right? As a fundamental thing that, I will teach you how to be innovative so that you can make your life easier.
Right. Yeah.
Rather than, and if you come with a problem to me, I will teach you the skills to solve for it.
That's
right.
Yeah.
So that way what happens is, at a bare minimum, of course he's trying to solve this problem, he might not even solve it, but at least he's making an attempt. That way when he goes to another problem solver, there's mutual respect, right, in terms of what each other does, and everybody has in a way in the same boat of innovation.
And everyone's thinking innovation at the same time. Awesome.
Right? And not really thinking that it's not my problem.
Right.
It is somebody else's problem. I am here as a solution, and if the solution doesn't work for me, right, I am going to resent it. Right. Not really thinking about why that person thought that way. Right?
Great. Thanks.
Right? So that's a very small thing that we at least follow.
That's great. I know we're short of time, really short of time, so I'd like to thank our panel, because we can go on and on with agility and the future of work, but thank you. Thanks, Mughal. Thanks, Uma. Thanks, Prahlad. It's been an enriching conversation today. Thank you very much.